Welcome to the Jeremiah Show. My special guest today, Dr. Angie McCartney and her daughter, Ruth McCartney. Dr. Angie owns Mrs. McCartney's Organic Teas, Mrs. McCartney's Wines, and Mrs. McCartney's CBD. She's an author and the co-host with Ruth of TeaFlix. And once upon a time, she was the stepmother and still is to Sir Paul McCartney. Her daughter, Ruth McCartney, was originally a British musician and, of course, the stepsister of Sir Paul McCartney. Ruth is now an internet, digital, and new media entrepreneur who is the CEO of McCartneyMultimedia.com, a creative digital agency who she runs it with her husband, Martin Nethercutt, and mother, Dr. Angie McCartney. Started that in 1995. Wow. Congratulations. She's also her mother's partner in Mrs. McCartney's Organic Teas. An internationally acclaimed public speaker and a former Russian pop sensation, she's appeared from Sydney to Siberia. Ruth McCartney has seen and done it all. So as the McCartneys like to say, put the kettle on, take off your shoes, and let's explore Mrs. McCartney's world of organic tea. Welcome, Dr. Angie and Ruth.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. It's such an honor. I hope you've got some tea in front of you. As you know, mine's still on the kettle, so we might have to take a break here to get that. It's not Mrs. McCartney's tea, though, and I can't wait to get my first order. And I love everybody. I want everybody to join me and order some tea up here. So, Angela Lucia McCartney was born in Liverpool, United Kingdom. Should I give out the dates? Is that okay?
Yes, by all means.
In November 1929. And she married her first husband, Eddie, in 1956. And they had their daughter, Ruth, who's on the show right now. She was born in February 1960. Sadly, though, Angie was widowed in 1962. In 64, though, her friends Mike and Bet introduced her to their uncle, Jim McCartney. They married in November, and they spent 12 loving years together. Angie and Ruth were at his side when he passed, sadly, in March of 1976. So, Angie, I wanted to talk first about Jim McCartney. What type of man was he?
Oh, he was a terrific man. He was very self-effacing, very laid back, and never liked to be in the forefront of things. Very humorous, very witty. I mean, we'd walk into a restaurant or somewhere and he'd look at somebody and say, she's got a great face for radio. Things like that. Just little asides he loved. And he loved doing crossword puzzles. And it was very much, he wasn't well educated because they were from a very poor family of 8 children. And he and his brother Joe shared a pair of boots. That's how down in the mouth they were in those days. And they used to share the boots. One would go to school one day with the boots on, and the other would go to school the next day. And you had to pay a penny a day to go to school in those days. So it was a real struggle for their mum to decide. And they had, a gaggle of children, but they only had one toothbrush between them. Can you imagine? In this day and age, it's hard, isn't it, to imagine? But there was always music in the house. Everybody loved music. And funnily enough, even poor working class families in those days, most of them had a piano, an upright piano. And a lot of the entertainment and relief and relaxation was to sing around, get around the piano and sing. Songs from the shows, and music hall theatre in those days in England was pretty big. And there were lots of popular songs, and everybody would sing wartime songs, and World War II was, well, they were World War One actually growing up. Yeah. They used to sing songs like Pack Up Your Troubles in Your Old Kit Bag and things like that. And they didn't ever think that they were impoverished or anything because there was love, laughter, and music always in the family.
I guess, when you have those three things, you're not really impoverished, are you?
No,
No, that makes you pretty rich in my book.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's really kind of all you need,
Yeah.
that and,
Yeah.
some bread and jam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that with 8 kids, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Well, do you think that Jim got his sense of humor a little bit by being raised in those times and just,
Oh, yeah.
things you've just got to roll with it, right? You've got to see
Absolutely.
the humor in it.
Yeah, I also think if you're born in the north of England, you're born with a built-in sense of humor. It's like a microchip, but it's in everybody. Liverpool people particularly they don't know when they're being funny. They just are. And
Yeah.
it's still alive and well today, that attitude, and to, not take yourself too seriously and, insult people in a loving way. I mean, Ruth still does it to this day. She calls me an old bat. Oh, come on, you old bat, she'll say. And even sometimes we were in a bar once. No, you'll find that hard to believe. And
Shocking.
shocking. Stood up to leave a bar, and Ruth said to me, "Come on, thingy, what's your name?" And she helped me out of my chair. And there was a woman in the next booth who said, "Stepmother," and she doesn't even know her name. I thought, oh, come on.
You both like to have some fun with people
Oh,
around
yeah,
you, I imagine.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
And
if you look at the times when my dad was born in 1902, Ange was born in 1929. The Beatles were all born during Hitler's World War II. So if you didn't laugh, what was the alternative? You just go jump off the roof?
right,
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
you had to
That,
be self-effacing and you had to see the glass half full part of it, for part of life,
that's right.
right? There was
Yeah.
you weren't allowed to indulge yourself. And, Ange would sometimes say, "Oh, I feel a bit down today, whatever." And her mother would say, "Go and scrub the kitchen floor. Go and do some old lady's gardening. Just get out and get over yourself." That was the attitude we had in
Yeah,
those
growing
days.
up, I used to think, what on earth has scrubbing the kitchen floor got to do with me being depressed? But now I know what she means. Even
you-
sometimes Ruth, if she's had a particularly grueling day with technology or maybe some tough clients, and she said, "Oh, still say to her, go and scrub the kitchen floor."
Keeps your
so
mind
is that
busy.
Yeah,
Just keeps your
that's
mind.
basically code for anything, but get your mind off it and don't
that's
feel
right.
sorry for
Yes.
yourself. Yeah.
Stop indulging yourself. Do something else. Yeah.
Yep, that's
Yep.
it.
Sorry, Ruth, I cut you off. What were you saying?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's just like
Yeah.
get over yourself.
Yeah.
We didn't have, which was is a bad thing. I'm saying it wasn't good, but we didn't have the awareness of, mental health and self-care and all of those things in those days. And you just were told to just get over yourself,
Hmm.
Mhm.
stiff
Yeah.
upper lip and all the British, keep calm and carry on, all that.
Right. Well, Angie, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in the same town as Jim? Were you aware of, had you met
Yes, I grew
before?
up in Liverpool, and
Okay.
I went to, well, I was born on the other side of the Mersey in a little town called Hoylake, and that's where Cynthia Lennon lived too when she was first, on Merseyside. She was born in Harrogate, but she grew up just in the same little town as I did, Hoylake.
As did James Bond, Daniel
Oh, that's
Craig.
right, Daniel Craig. And who was
I
the
love
actor?
Daniel
Glenda
Craig.
Jackson. Oh,
Brenda
yes,
Jackson, yeah.
oozing with talented people. Yeah. And
No, wow.
yeah, I went to school. I lived in the other side of the river. When I was young, I had asthma very badly and pneumonia. I was a real whinging, sniveling little thing. And
Nothing's changed.
nothing's changed. There you go, ceased. And my father he was a pharmacist and he worked for a GP. And this doctor said to him, with Angela's lungs and all the trouble she has every winter, you should get away from living so close to the River Mersey. I can help you get a house in Liverpool in the corporation housing. So my dad said, yeah, okay. Pursued the idea. And eventually we got a house and we moved when I was 3 years old over the river to Liverpool, which is the same town where Jim was born and grew up. So we basically both had that same sort of, work ethic and
Hmm.
do the best you can and just get on with it. Yeah. Ruth's pointing to the, I'm not looking at the right screen. I'm looking up in the air. I'm sorry. I'm not looking.
There you
We
go.
have a plethora of screens here.
It's a
You
rough
know,
one.
it takes so long to get Ruth is an expert at this, but I, even me, Angie, I sit, it takes so long to get the camera angles right.
Yeah.
You got to look at, you know, some
Don't get too many of the
copy.
chins in.
Yeah, all of mine get in there every time they sneak
Yeah.
in. Well, Ruth, when you were growing up, your father passed away when you were pretty young. What do you remember about that time? Um, and going into the McCartney family, was it really what you, because of your age, I'd imagine that was some of the first memories you have with the family.
Actually, I can remember being about 6 months old, being in my pram at the end of the garden, and some weird, creepy guy would get off the bus and mess with me every day. I remember my first birthday, what I was wearing, where all the furniture was, where the cat was. So I have a really long memory, which I hope not bodes well for the future. But yeah, when I was 4, just shy of 5, Ange was introduced to Jim that summer in August. They married in November of 64, and I would be 5 in February of 65 in the Bahamas. Shared a birthday with George Harrison, who was 10 days later than me, during the filming of Help. So my life went from black and white to, color in a matter of months.
And now all of a sudden you have a new brother.
I did 2 brothers, Mike and Paul. Yeah, 2 stepbrothers,
Two
and
brothers.
they're a good bit older than me. Obviously, Mike is 16 years older, and Paul is 18 years older than I. But I think they sort of used to like to. I was like a paper doll, I suppose. They would, play not brother sister, but like
Big
take
uncles.
big
Yeah.
uncle, yeah, take
Yeah.
me out, dress me up, and pretend like, hey, is this what it's going to be like to have a kid? But the minute I would get cranky or hungry or, just want to go lie down, they'd be
Or
like,
pee
oh,
pants,
Ange,
yeah.
or Ange, here you go. Well, I wasn't. Hopefully, I
Take her
wasn't
home.
peeing my
Take her
pants at
home.
4. I might have been peeing my pants at 64, but hopefully not at 4. But yeah, they would just sort of, yeah, okay, had enough of playing with the baby now. Here she is.
Yeah, you can have her back now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it was crazy. School was mad, and everybody wanted a piece of you, and girls used to try and cut pieces of my hair, and they would steal the labels out of the back of my uniform because they had my last name on them, and they'd steal my packed lunch.
Wow. So they were the Beatles when you moved into the house, and they were
64,
already gaining fame.
well, they were very famous in England, for many years, and then all of a sudden, 9th of
Yeah.
February 1964, Ed Sullivan, and the rest is history. Now we're talking about November of that same year. And so it was just absolute madness, fans hanging outside, the driveway, and stealing handfuls of gravel from the drive and going around to the farmland in the back and getting through our hedgerows and over the fences and appearing at the kitchen window and trying to, bribe the mailman to wheel them with the mail. And it was crazy.
That must have just been bizarre. Like you said, black and white to color, like in
Yeah.
technicolor,
Yeah,
probably
all Technicolor all the time.
Yeah.
all the
And
time.
right, and then throughout the whole 60s, Paul would come home sometimes for weekends, every 3 or 4 weeks when he wasn't touring, just to get out of the smoke. And sometimes he'd bring John Lennon for a house guest for the weekend, or sometimes he'd say, oh, I've told a few of my friends to stop by. And the doorbell would ring, and it would be Dusty Springfield and Madeline Bell and Long John Baldry and a host of characters who would come in and take over the whole house for the weekend. So then my brother Mike, of course, was also in an amazing satirical musical group called Scaffold, and they played the Edinburgh Festival. So they'd come home with the likes of Peter Cook or Rod Stewart, or, hey, can Rod crash on the couch? So it was just,
That,
there's poor Ange in the middle of all this, trying to keep me on the straight and narrow, get me on the school
right.
bus on time and doing my homework.
And I used to say
That's
to Ruth, it's only a white lie, but if the kids at school ask you if Paul is home, just say no, even if he's home. And she didn't understand. She really hadn't sort of grasped what it was all about by then. She was 4, nearly 5.
yeah.
And yeah, the kids would like maybe the 11, 12, 13-year-old, and she's only just turning 5. And they'd say, will you come to my house for tea?
Or come to my birthday party,
Yeah.
expecting to be asked
Hoping
back,
to be asked back in the hopes of seeing who, is he home?
Yeah.
Right. You
All of a
know,
sudden, my best friends were all twice my age. I'm
Yeah.
like, "Hmm."
Tell Jeremiah about when you broke your leg.
Oh, so May of 1967, I went out with a girlfriend, Julie, and her mother. We went to the beach and we were just arsing around with footballs. And I decided it was a great idea to walk along a very high, narrow wall, fell off, broke my leg, stuck the right shin bone through the
We
skin,
don't want the
broke it in
details.
11 places, twisted my foot. I'm
Ah.
clumsy. When I'm clumsy, I'm good. And that the English equivalent 911 ambulance went to the local Birkenhead Children's Hospital. And the nurse said to me, well, what's your name? And I said, Ruth. And she said, what's your last name? And I said, I'm not allowed to say. And she said, well, what's your phone number? I said, I'm not allowed to tell you. Well, where do you live? Well, I'm not allowed to say. And she twigged. She went, I think it's the McCartney kid. I think maybe this is why because, I was too young at 7 to be in the CIA or the KGB or whatever.
Well,
So
did you have an alias at that time?
no,
No?
You
just
hadn't
Ruth,
been given one. Did you
Scabby.
ever get
All
one?
used to call her Scabby because she
because I was
was
always falling over.
falling over and getting scabs on her knees.
So anyway, so they called the local police who went round and knocked on the door, and Ange opened the door to 2 policemen. They said, do you have a 7-year-old daughter named Ruth? And her heart stopped. She's like, well,
What's she done?
what's she done? She said, oh, she's broken her leg. She's in Birkenhead Children's Hospital. But I was trained, if anybody asked me my last name, my phone number, or my address, I wasn't allowed to say.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't come up with something. You have such a great imagination and you're so creative. I'm surprised you
Well,
didn't come up with
I
a
kind of had
007 name.
kind of had shards of bone sticking through my skin, so I was a bit busy with
Man,
that.
you're giving me, I want to bite down on something. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
giving me the chills. Can I
Yeah.
back up for a second to um, you going to school and everybody sort of attacking you through, via your famous brother and then not knowing who was your real friend and who wasn't. Have you been at a young age? That must have been very difficult to cope with, to like make straight in your mind. Have you got past that? Have you been
Oh,
able to?
yes.
Because so many people I know, when they feel like, they question, are you my friend or are you not? I think in this fame world that you grew up in, was that really hard for you? I want to kind of give little Ruth a
Yeah.
hug.
Oh, but, well, at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I was just, guileless, didn't really understand all of that. But when I was about 12 or 13, I had a terrible crush on this 16-year-old boy in school called Nigel Blako. We're still friends on Facebook. Lovely man. And
I wonder if his wife's
he can't.
listening.
Judy, thumbs up if you're listening. You got a good one.
Don't tell Martin.
That's all right. I got a good one too. And so he sort of said, well, I'd like to take you to New Brighton on the bus and we'll go on the Ferris wheel and this, that, and the other. And Jim said, well, we have to meet this boy first. And he's 16, And the day he came around to sort of pass the audition to meet Ange and Jim, Paul happened to be home and he was in a particularly, I don't know whether it was a cranky mood or a protective mood, whatever, but he had my dad's
Protective.
he had my dad's brown and white checkered slippers on and a cardigan that he borrowed from my dad, one of these Aran cardigans with the brown leather buttons on it.
Yeah.
And he's standing there with his arm in the fireplace, on the mantelpiece. And he's like, well, what are your intentions towards my kid sister? We need to know all about you before we let her out, and you can take her and buy her a bus ticket and take her on the other side of the world. This poor kid, can you imagine? He's 16, and here's Paul McCartney from the Beatles giving him
Drilling him.
the nth degree.
Yeah.
But he still took me on a few dates and bought me a little ID bracelet with my name on it and all that stuff. But Paul was very protective, and then right around that time, he said, I'm going to tell you something now. You're going to probably hate me and go upstairs and slam your bedroom door and, never speak to me for the rest of the weekend. But he said, you have to be really careful who you make friends with, because you have to ask yourself at every single stage, do they want to know you for you? Or do they want a backstage pass to the Beatles? And I thought, you bastard, you egotistical sod, but that wasn't where he was coming from. And it served me well.
Sounds like he was a good older brother.
Oh yeah, very protective and very,
Good.
yeah. So custodial, I would
too.
say.
By that
As it
time,
should
he'd
be.
begun to see the world too.
Well, yeah,
know.
bear in mind, if
Yeah.
I'm 12, he's nearly 30, right? So he's been
And
around
it,
the block and then some, and he has seen what sycophants people can be, and he just doesn't want me to ever go through what he saw happening around them. This transactional society
yeah.
that people live in. You know, there's the two kinds of people when you boil it down, really. There are aspirational people and empathetic aspirational people, and there are transactional people. And there's nothing wrong with either, as long as when you go into a relationship, personally or in business, as long as you know which one it is and you don't expect the other, it's fine.
And I'd imagine you've really got to understand your value, and be good with
Right.
that, be secure
Well,
with that.
I hadn't even started at 12, all I knew was I wanted to mail myself to David Cassidy and go and live in Hollywood. The Partridge Family, 1972. What do you want from me? When I actually,
Hey, there's where
when
you
I,
could use Paul's influence.
when I finally met Cassidy and we became fast friends and actually got to work together, and he and Martin, both Aries, and we built the first davidcassidy.com or whatever. And I was telling him this whole story. He's like, "Oh my God, were you that kid?" Because Paul was home one weekend. And I said, Paul, David Cassidy's staying at the Dorchester in London. And I found out that his staying under David Jackson because he was Jack Cassidy's son. So his alias was Jack's son, David Jack's son.
Very smart. You needed one of those aliases.
Yeah, right. So Matahari, that was
You probably still do.
Matahari. And so I finally convinced Paul to ring the Dorchester and ask for David Jackson. And they said, "Who's calling?" And he said, "Paul McCartney." And the operator said, "Really seriously?" He's like, "Yeah, my kid's sister, this, that." So the operator put the call through, and I'm on the extension, and I hear Cassidy pick up the phone and go, "Hello." And Paul says, "Hi, is this David Bruce Jack's son?" And he's like, "Who wants to know?" And he said, "Well, he said, who are you? Who's calling?" And Paul said, "Well, this is Paul. I'm calling on behalf of my kid sister. This is Paul McCartney." And Cassidy said, "Yeah, and I'm the effing Duke of Edinburgh."
Yeah. I wonder how often that
I heard his
happened.
voice. I heard his voice.
Wonder how often that happened to Paul, Paul McCartney, sure you are.
Yeah,
Or
right.
people like,
In the old days when we used to write checks in the supermarket for groceries, you'd sign your check and show your ID, and everybody would say, "Oh, are you any relation?" And sometimes I'd say, "Oh no, wouldn't that be lucky?" And sometimes if I had a little time, if someone wanted to ask a question, I'd say, "Yeah, he's my stepbrother." And 9 times out, "Oh, you're full of crap. Bet you wish you were. Bet you wish you was."
then you're like,
You
why was I nice? I was trying to be nice.
Why
You
bother?
can't win either way.
You can't win. Angie, how are you as a mother? Were you worried about your daughter growing up? I mean, everything turned out great, obviously.
I was
And you
very
obviously are
strict,
close, but
very
you're strict?
very strict with her, with table manners, thank you notes, always being aware of your manners.
Only pick your nose with a silver spoon, things like that.
That's right. Only pick your nose with the little finger.
Yes.
Genteel.
Like holding up a cup of tea?
Yeah, that's right.
That's a no-no, by the way.
Oh, see, I want to learn these things. We're going to learn these soon.
Okay, yes.
All the etiquette, all the tea etiquette. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I think I gave her a sense of alertness, yes, and always let me know where you are. She used to go out after school on a bicycle just round the corner to play with friends. That was in the days when kids would play out in the garden,
Until dark.
with a skipping rope or whatever, bouncing a ball in the garden. And God, isn't it sad when you think you can't do that now?
No,
But if she wasn't home by the time it started to get dark, I'd be on the phone to Nicola Brown's mother and somebody else's mother. Is Ruth in your garden? And whoever it was would always say, "You better get home. Your mother's on the phone."
She's on the warpath.
Yeah.
Small but mighty.
Yeah.
4'10", but carries a big frying pan.
That's right. Yeah.
As long as you knew that, Ruth, as long as you understood that, you'd be home, right? You'd be home on time.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Well, I imagine, Angie, it was difficult, not challenging, probably for you as a mother
Oh, yeah.
growing up in that, and then you're a stepmother to one of the most famous men in the world. I don't know
Mm, yes.
how you deal with that because most kids are like, "You're
No, I
not
don't
my
think I
mom."
realized what I was getting into. I don't
You
think I
did,
realized
yeah.
how all life-changing it was going to be. But Jim was great. He helped me through it, you know.
Hmm.
We used to have parties. Paul would come home and Mike would sometimes say, "Oh, let's have a few people over," which meant like 60 people. And I'd have to call the local hotel down the road for catering because I couldn't. Suddenly, 64 people going to be in
For
the
dinner,
house at
you know,
night, you
yeah.
know, yeah.
We
And
we made lots of sandwiches, egg butties. You couldn't afford to feed them egg salad sandwiches now, could you?
oh no, no.
Do you make a good egg salad sandwich?
I
Oh yeah.
do.
Well, Ruth is a
Ooh.
real,
I
Ruth
know.
is the
yeah,
one.
Ruth,
I've got to
Right.
have Ruth I love egg salad sandwich. Ruth,
exactly.
one time we'll have lunch. I'm inviting
Yes,
myself.
Okay, fine.
I'll,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll bring
yeah.
the eggs since they're so expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Are you going to sell your house?
Get
Yeah,
a
I'll sell my house.
Get a mortgage to buy eggs? Yeah.
get a second mortgage, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so I want to mention this new book that you have. There Are Faces I Remember.
Yeah.
Beautiful title. I love that. And I want to give out the website real quick. If you're anywhere online and you're listening to this conversation, you can go to therearefacesiremember.com and get a copy of the book. There's autographed copies. So if you are a Beatles fan, and who isn't, this is the ultimate book for your collection. There's no other book about the Beatles and the 60s that exists like this new collectible. So I wanted to ask you about the cover. There's a very unique painting
Mhm.
of each member of the Fab Four, and tell me about the artist.
So Shannon is an incredible Shannon McDonald. She is the only officially designated by both Apple, the late great Neil Aspinall from Apple, and the city of Liverpool. She is the official Beatles artist, and she does all of this stuff with airbrush. They are not photographs. I mean, it is just if you're listening to this, you can't see it, but if you're on, I'd encourage you to go and see the YouTube version. She's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And then I had the crazy idea to illustrate all 168 people inside the book myself digitally. It was before AI came along. This book has been in the making for 3 or 4 years. So there's one of our, oh gosh, it's putting lipstick on him. That's no good. That's Zoom. One of our fearless leaders, Jesse Jackson, and there's just so many people in the book, the Beatles themselves and what have you. So it took me 2 years to digitally paint everyone in the book. And then finally, thankfully, Shannon came to the rescue. She's at artistshannon.com. And she's also been on our TeaFlix YouTube series. But she is just absolutely, when you see her work, she works from her out of her head. And then she'll look at a photograph and turn airbrushing and pencil dots and this, that, and the other into a photograph that she painted. I can't say enough about her. She's fantastic.
Well, and I got a
She also builds guitars. She's a luthier.
Right.
huh.
She builds
Amazing.
guitars for Cheap Trick, and she's just built a huge sign for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in, I think Cincinnati just opened one. She built like the Gigantar, it's called. It's like a 46 foot. You should have her on the show. She's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll put our website out there in the copy of the show so that
Oh,
people can
do,
go
yes.
and take a look at that. Well, tell me, what will you? Well, this is really a great book, and what will people learn? What makes it stand out from all the other Beatles memorabilia
Well, it's
books that
just
are out there?
my
What makes it
own,
so special?
yeah, my own thoughts about various people that I met over the years that I wouldn't have met if I wasn't married into the McCartney family, obviously. And
Everyone in the book, all 168, and there's some in print, and it's in a slipcase. It's 12 by 12, full color illustrations and everything. And there are QR codes in the book to TeaFlix interviews, and everybody in the book was a personal contact or friend or Angie's met them, shook their hand, looked them in the eye, and or had many multi-year relationships with these people. She could have written a book about all kinds of peripheral people. And there are some people missing in the book that will surprise people and go, oh my gosh, why isn't so-and-so in there? Well, because Ange didn't met them. That was the criteria.
Okay.
When I came up with the title, there are faces I remember. I'm like, so the deal is you had to have had personal interaction with all of these people.
Yeah, for example, I never met Stuart Sutcliffe.
No, he was gone before our time.
Yeah, but then over the years, I became friends with his sister,
Pauline, who curated his estate.
and she's passed on now, and her friend and partner, Diane, is still looking after the legacy. And I think with David Bedford, the writer from Liverpool, together they keep that legacy alive.
So like I said, there's 168 people in there. There are anecdotes. There are some people like Gene Simmons from Kiss wanted to contribute and did a Q&A for the book. So there are several Q&A people throughout there. And yeah, you would never connect the Beatles between the front and back covers of a book with some people so diverse as Ella Fitzgerald and the Reverend Jesse Jackson and Gene Simmons and Harold Faltermeyer.
Right, exactly.
Top Gun, right?
But that's how your life has gone. This book follows your personal diaries. It follows your personal stories and your interactions with some of these.
I still keep a diary. I write in my diary every morning. It's on my desk. And I don't really write a lot of stuff, but I'll put in maybe a note about something important in,
like doing this today.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're in the diary today.
Uh-oh.
Look out now.
Look out, Jeremiah. All the diary police.
March 11th, 2025.
That was that day.
I won't forget this conversation. I won't forget this time.
I really to send him some tea. So
well, we're going to order some tea, and we're going to get everybody else to do that too. Tea is such a wonderful thing. We're going to talk about that next. But before we take our first break here, the book again is There Are Faces I Remember. And Angie, as she said, it's her personal diary. Included within the pages are stories about John, George, Paul, and Ringo, obviously, and their managers, including Brian Epstein and George Martin, celebrities and musicians from Billy Preston to Rod Stewart, Petula Clark to Annie Lennox, and family members and authors and journalists and fans. And there's even an appearance by President Bill Clinton. So again, stories and personal anecdotes from Angie. Accompanying each story is a unique portrait digital masterpiece meticulously created by Ruth, aka the Digital Diva. I'd really encourage everyone to pick this up. And weekly, you both have a show that I just missed a few hours ago because I was in another interview, but I don't want you to miss it. Go and subscribe on Netflix. It's called TeaFlix Tuesdays. Don't miss an episode of Dr. Angie McCartney's TeaFlix Tuesdays chat show with fascinating guests from the Beatles world, from pop culture, philosophy, chefs, authors, artists, and so much more. I also wanted to thank all of our listeners in the United Kingdom. It's number 3 this week. It's our top listeners. And I want to mention Core Radio, KOR Radio, and Somerset UK radio stations, Somerset Pop UK. Thanks for listening to us on the radio stations. You can find Dr. Angie McCartney at Mrs. McCartney's Teas. You go to mrsmccartneysteas.com. And you can also find Angie at mrsmccartneyscbd.com. And I got one more for you. She's a busy lady, mrsmccartneyswines.com. Her latest book, as I said before, is There Are Faces I Remember.com. And you can find Ruth at ruthmccartney.com or mccartneymultimedia.com. All you need is tea. We'll be right back.